Hello, listeners. This is Accents, a podcast for literature, arts, and culture on WUKY. I am your host, Katerina Stoykova. This episode has been brought to you by Kentucky Humanities and the Kentucky Book Festival. My guest today is writer Scott Guild, the author of the novel Plastic. Hi, Scott. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Katerina. I'm excited.
I am so excited to talk to you about this book, both a dystopian comedy and a serious dissection of our own pre-apocalypse.
I don't know why I laughed at that.
Well, better laugh, right?
Then cry.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, our own pre-apocalypse. Plastic is a fabulously inventive look at the hollow core of American society and a guide to how we might reanimate all of its broken plastic pieces. Tell us about this book.
So Plastic is a novel that I started in 2013, so a very long time ago, before I had done any of my graduate training in writing, before when I had just decided that I was going to stop being a full-time musician and going to fully devote myself to writing, which had really been like my first love. So in many ways, the book took shape over a long period of time, and there were multiple breaks along the way. But by the end of it, it had become something very different than when I first started out. And I was, it was an exciting process. And I feel like for me, the book is very personal because it sort of tracks my whole evolution as a person and my outlook on life during that time. So, it was a lot of fun to write, and I'm also realizing I told you absolutely nothing about what the book was about in that. So,
Who is Erin?
Yes, exactly. So it's set in a world of plastic figurines, so people with hinges and hollow bodies who move about stiffly and occasionally break into song. And Erin is a woman in her early to mid 20s, who is dealing with a lot of grief and trauma and is coming from a place of great isolation, and also in a moment in a near future American society that's suffered a lot of collective trauma too. And she's attempting to find love and attempting to find a new path for her future. But in the midst of this, her past is haunting her, and lots of things are complicating this new relationship she's having with a fellow figurine named Jacob.
So this is literary fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that this book flirts with sci-fi somewhat?
Yes, the book, a lot of different genres kind of flood in, right? So the fact that it's set in the near future, there are elements of kind of the ecological crisis we're having in there too. So there are speculative fiction elements where it is a science fiction book in the sense that it's set in the future, dealing with these dystopian things. But then at the same time, the stakes of the book, much like literary fiction, are largely personal and about her emotional life and things like that. And then, it's kind of, with everybody being plastic figurines and all, kind of dips a toe into experimental fiction too.
And what about the genre of screenwriting?
Yes, definitely. There are a lot of just full TV episodes in the book that are Erin watching a show she loves called Nuclear Family, and those are written like a screenplay. And Erin herself kind of sees the world as TV episodes and so forth. So much of it is written as if we're watching a TV show, because that's kind of how she's seeing her own life. And so she'll turn and talk to the camera, and there's a camera described a lot that's sort of ambiently following her too. So, yeah.
I must say, what kind of imagination does it take to create this world, to create these characters, to sustain them, and speak about the sense of humor? I don't know how you speak about the sense of humor, but what can you say?
I can say, I think one thing, I talked about how this book took a long time to develop, and for many years it was not a funny book at all. It was a very serious, grim depiction of a future world. And I think as I grew older, the sense of irony and humor came into the material slowly, as I'd lived in it long enough that I could see the humorous edges of things. And so it felt like a fuller a fuller picture of the way I see the world or something like that through years of working on it. So I would have friends I'd show the book in the early days, and they go, Scott, like when we hang out with you, we laugh and we have a good time and you have a smile on your face, and then we read your book and this is just, it seems like your inner life must be a pretty dark place. So I don't know exactly how the humor emerged, except to say that I spent so much time with Aaron and the crew in Plastic that things started to be amusing and funny, and irony began to erupt.
What was it like to build this world, to write about it, to live in it?
That was a very fun journey. I think once I understood that I was writing a book about plastic figurines, which was, not initially the case.
Not a given, right?
No. And for many years, it wasn't a book about plastic figurines. It was just a lot of sad people in a dystopian world, right? But once I understood that it was a book about plastic figurines and their hinges would be squeaking and they'd be talking in this clipped language, I think then finally as a writer, after years and years of kind of pushing a boulder up a hill, I finally felt like I was on the downhill slope. And I realized, as a writer, that's what I needed. I needed a world that I felt like was like giving me ideas and giving back to me. So, it's almost like if you've been in a series of unsuccessful romantic relationships or something, and then finally you're in one that's fully nurturing and healthy and alive,
I wouldn't know anything about that.
Sorry. So then it became a real joy. And maybe to go back to your earlier question too about like, how you create something is like, you find a world or you find a space that feels really, not to pun, but animated, that feels very exciting to you. And then you can immerse yourself in it and lose it. And now it's been sad to leave, Now I don't think I'm going to write another book about plastic figurines. So the figurine world is all in that book, and I'm on the outside looking in like,
Does this book make people uncomfortable? Because not everybody likes to look at the mirror.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you feel in creating the plastic figurine world, it does hold up a certain mirror to what our own world is like right now.
What don't you think?
Oh, I mean, I very much, was very much what I was going for, but...
I mean, I think that's the goal of the book.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that allegory.
Yeah, I think there are certain things to get into the book and lose yourself in the book that you have to take on. So you have to, you're in this world with the rigid plastic figurines, and they don't talk quite the way we do, and there's a lot of genres and formal conventions coming in. And I think for readers who, have read 15, 20, 30 pages and are enjoying that experience, I think at that point they just start to have a lot of fun and really enjoy it. So I haven't seen readers feel like the way I'm rendering the plastic world is making them uncomfortable. I think I have seen some readers saying like, this, maybe I'm not the ideal reader for this type of fiction or something like that. But yeah.
Speak about the soundtrack.
Yes, thank you so much. So as part of writing this book, I made a full album of music. And I think for me, that felt like an intrinsic part of the novel. So I'm very much obsessed with and love the history of the novel as a form and the kind of like tradition of the novel. So the novel sort of emerges in the 16 and 1700s as this very dominant form because it fuses together a lot of in early print culture, a lot of the dominant narrative strands. So you have like travelogue and history and memoir and all these myth and all these popular forms, and the novel is a kind of place where all the different narrative forms of the day can find a home in this big sprawling, what Henry James called like the loose baggy monster. Well, I think he was actually criticizing Melville and Tolstoy specifically when he said that, but I like it. I find it a really like warm and inviting way of thinking about what the novel is and all the different literary forms that can find a home in it. So I think for me, writing Plastic, especially that it's set in this future world, and like you said, it's kind of trying to hold up a mirror or capture what our current moment feels like. I was really interested in, what how capacious the novel is, right? And that you can bring in all these different storytelling forms. So I've also made like music videos for Plastic and all the different narrative forms I find compelling, television, film. I sort of saw the novel as a space that could hold all these things. So for instance, on the book itself, there's a QR code that takes you right to the album. And I think of that QR code on the book not as this like addition to the novel, but as part of the reading experience, that you can be listening to the music and hearing full versions of Erin's songs. And she lives in such a musical space. The album tells her story just through music. The 9 songs on the album are chronological, and you can go through the whole story of Plastic in a musical setting. So it was really exciting for me to feel like a novel could, just hold all those different elements. And I'd say most of my favorite novelists do that work, like Charles Yu, for instance, with like Interior Chinatown, or Jennifer Egan with Visit from the Goon Squad. Like they have this ability to bring in all these different forms and narrative paradigms into their work. So yeah, so I was seeking that, and I was luckily enough to get with Pantheon Books, who are an incredible publisher of fiction that can take that. They're comfortable with fiction that takes those types of chances and brings in a lot of different narrative modes. Yeah.
You said the words, I decided that from full-time musician, I'm going to become a full-time writer.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering what your parents' reaction was to that.
I would say probably relief, because there are structures in our society for a person to get on a path to become a writer that do not exist for the touring musician. You know, you can, if you want to be a writer, you can apply to grad school and get a TA-ship and move to a university town, and, you know, then you're on a path to get an advanced terminal degree and become a professor. And so I think they saw a more stable kind of world than when you're out there trying to make it as a musician, it can still feel very, very much like the Wild West, you know. And I'd say in my 20s, I really loved that experience, you know. But then there was in a sense too that as a songwriter, just writing, so because I would write all the songs for our band, or most of them, I could never jump as deeply into imaginary spaces as I could with writing fiction. So I went through this experience in my late 20s where I lost my stepmother that I was very close to, and we were doing home hospice together. And a lot of the actually sections with Erin's father and Plastic are based around that. Yeah, I started writing fiction again at that point and realized, oh my gosh, like this is the most creatively satisfying thing, which I think I had known at an earlier point in my life. But yeah, it was an amazing journey back. Yeah.
But it's also a solitary experience, for good or bad, for good and bad.
For good and bad, yeah. For me, good.
Well, also you have all the control. So
there's that, yeah.
Well, in music, not so much.
It's
right. I mean, I'm not a musician, so I don't know.
It's interesting. Well, I think with technology these days, you really can create fully fleshed out musical compositions just by yourself, because you can just bring in so much technology and you can record all the instruments and so forth. I think for me, my writing process is very social, but it's not. When I was doing music, for instance, it's like you write a song and then right away you take it to the band, and you know the ink is still wet kind of as you're bringing it to the band. I think I enjoy the process of writing novels where I spend a very long time, sometimes years, just on my own, digging in as deeply as I can into the space, and then I bring it to people and take their advice very seriously. And you know, I end up working really closely with different readers. So I like how social writing is, but I also like that you get to go off for multiple years. And
I personally think that book tours require lots of effort.
Oh, book tours themselves, yeah. And we've done about 30
book
events
promotions
for Plastic, yeah.
One of which is the Kentucky Book Festival.
Yay!
In November 2nd.
I can't wait. Yeah.
We're very excited. Tell us about opening for Blondie.
Oh, yes. Well, that was a completely different moment in my life. So that would have been 2009. And I was living in Boston, Massachusetts. And our band, had been playing out maybe for like 5 or 6 months. And it was just going very well for us on the local scene. And people were coming to our shows. And Greg Hawkes from the band The Cars, became a fan. You don't know Greg Hawkes at The Cars?
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I listened
I'm
to...
a foreigner, okay? So that's my excuse for stuff.
I listened to an interview recently where you were called out for not knowing what CBGBs was.
Oh, yeah.
And so, but the Cars were this very big new wave band in the 80s, and Greg Hawkes was their like synthesizer player. So he would play with us at shows. So things were going well. And then the B-52s, Rock Lobster.
I'm sorry.
Love Shack.
Love Shack. Yes.
There you go.
Okay.
There you go. I'm fascinated by that because it's like, what is so preeminent and forward in American culture that you would know? And like Love Shack clearly makes that bar.
Yeah.
You know, there's certain things.
Well, I was 24 when I immigrated, so.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What year was that when you immigrated? Oh, I know I'm not interviewing you on this, but I'm always just
No, that's okay. 95.
95. That would have been an interesting moment to come in. Yeah, because you would have been right in the middle of like grunge and all that.
I didn't really listen to much music at that point.
Oh, yeah.
No.
You weren't listening to a lot of Offspring and Smash Mouth and Soundgarden. And...
Well, I know who is Smash Mouth.
Oh, you know Smash Mouth. Okay,
Yeah.
Fascinating. All right, yeah. So the B-52s were this rather, they did Love Shack. It was a very famous new wave band, and they took us out on tour all up and down the coast. And then as part of that, we got a call that said, "Oh, and now Blondie has a show for you to open for Blondie." And I mean, at that point, our brains melted, and we couldn't believe it was happening. And in many ways, it's all just a complete fog, But they did, after the show, I remember standing there, and they all came over, Debbie Harry included, and introduced themselves and said hi, and we chatted with them for a minute. And then one of the huge regrets of my life was they said, "Oh, we're doing the show in New York. You should come hang out with us after the show in New York City." And I was like, and then the date was another show with the B-52s that we couldn't possibly reschedule or do anything like that. So it wasn't like we could say, "Oh, like, can we come hang out with you another point, like world famous rock stars?" So that was that moment passing, but it was a vision. And then we went back to our normal lives in Boston, and we were very poor and hustling, and it was it was just like a little Cinderella moment, the carriage turned back to a pumpkin, as it were.
I would love to hear you read some from the book.
Oh, is that right? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah, please.
Thank you so much. So this is a passage from about, I guess it's page 40 in the book, where there's a TV show that Aaron loves called Nuclear Family, and we see several full episodes of this TV show inside the book. So the main character, Max, is a boy of about 13 or 14, also a plastic figurine, and he's just found out that his parents' marriage is in a very bad state, which he had been ambiently aware of, but now he's just heard his mother in the other room on a phone call with a friend saying that she's thinking of like divorcing her father. So he's now lying awake thinking about all this, and again, he's in it's described as if he's like in a TV set, right? Because this is like a TV show we're watching. Max lies awake that night in the set of his bedroom. The set has an aquatic theme, the wallpaper covered with penguins and bow ties, the curtains with saxophone playing jellyfish, the bedspread with dolphins leaping from a tranquil sea. A plush squid sits grinning on a shelf above his desk, its rose-colored suckers dangling off the edge. The boy stares up at the ceiling, his face wan and worried, a stuffed seal hugged against his chest. He breathes an anxious sigh, then looks into the camera that films him above the bed. He begins to narrate out loud. "I keep thinking about Jim Tucker, this kid I knew from baseball. His parents had this nasty divorce, fought over every dollar, even made poor Jim choose between them. Then, after he chose his mom, she packed their bags and moved them across the country. What if Mom and Dad do the same thing? I could end up living 1,000 miles from Dad. I'd be here only in the summers, just like Jim. Well, at least I'm not alone right now. I can always go talk to Jesus. I wonder what he'll have to say." Max swings down his legs and strides across the set, stopping at a wooden cross above his bureau. A tiny Christ is nailed onto its beam. The Savior hangs there in his crown of thorns, no taller than a water glass, his eyes closed, a mournful mouth inside his painted beard. Max reaches out and pokes his gaunt stomach. "Jesus," he calls. "Jesus, wake up. I need your help." Max jabs him again, and the Christ figure stirs, his eyes snapping open. What? What is it?" he says in a gruff, elderly voice, decades older than his appearance. Can't you see I'm napping? The laugh track rumbles. You're always napping, Jesus, Max replies. For the last time, stop calling me Jesus. I'm not your real Lord and Savior, okay? You're 13 now, Max. I bet you're still asking for toys from the Santa at the mall. The laugh track erupts. Sorry, Morris, he says. I keep forgetting. Don't sweat it, kid. I get that your spiritual needs aren't being met elsewhere. Anyway, I'm really worried about something. Can I tell you? Morris shrugs his stretched out shoulders, his palms straining against the nails. I'm a captive audience, he says to his biggest laugh yet. The boy explains about his parents. By the time he finishes, he is wiping tears from his eyes. I just wish I could help them, he says. They weren't always this unhappy. Morris gives him a dubious look. They weren't? Don't you remember? They'd have those weekend getaways. Dad would take Mom on dates. He'd go to his schmugglin is this weird sport they play in the world. He'd go to his schmugglin club once a month, not 3 times a week. That man sure loves to play schmugglin. Me, I can't see the appeal. Too much mud. Mom and Dad, all they need is like a little boost to remember they like each other. Then they'll be fine. Kid, Morris says. I'm not sure it works that way. Why not? They got married, didn't they? They liked each other then. Listen, Max, don't you want your parents to be happy? Sure, of course. Just as long as they stay together. Morris sighs. Why don't you take out my nails for a minute? I think I know how to explain this. I'm glad this is your sense of humor. The boy gets his pair of pliers, then prizes the nails from Morris's palms and feet. The little savior leaps down to the bureau, where he suddenly stands in a beam of spotlight, dressed in a boater hat and a seersucker suit. He reaches out a pierced hand. A glittery dance cane whizzes into his clasp. Strolling the bureau like a vaudeville stage, he sings to a maudlin piano. It's awful sad when Mom and Dad are headed for divorce. They used to kiss, but their next tryst will be in family court. And you are just a kid who can't believe a parent could pack up their bags and leave. It hurts at first, but one day you'll say, hey, there's perks for kids of well-off divorcees. The music turns jaunty on the soundtrack, the piano fast and playful, a ukulele strumming to the ragtime beat. The squid on the shelf comes to life and bounds into the air, hooking an arm on a blade of the ceiling fan, spinning in gleeful circles. Its other arms hold gift-wrapped boxes, which it tosses in all directions. The tiny Christ tap dances with his cane as he sings the chorus. I know that you like Christmas. Well, how would you like to? I know that you like presents. 2 birthdays just for you. 2 bedrooms full of toys. 2 bank accounts to drain. 2 guilty parents overjoyed to buy away your pain. Morris pulls the boater hat off his head, kicking his pierced feet as he sings the finale. 2 guilty parents, they're well aware your childhood is ruined. 2 guilty parents, it's only fair. They buy their boy the moon. And I think I'll stop there. So Morris concludes his song.
Okay. I have cried on this show a few times, but never while laughing.
Oh, that means the world to me. Oh, thank you. That's so sweet. Yeah.
How do you come up with that stuff?
Morris. I don't, again, I've been with Morris a long time, and he wasn't always singing and dancing, but, spent a lot of years with Morris giving Max bad advice. A lot of different, they've been in a lot of different scrapes together, Morris and Max.
Is there going to be a movie on plastic?
I think for me that would feel like such a natural, organic kind of outgrowth of the project. So that would be really exciting,
Spielberg should do it.
I think Spielberg should come right in, and you just call him up. You know him, right? So we'll just make that happen.
No, basically, have you sold the movie rights?
No, nothing like that has happened. That would be really exciting. It's but it's only been out 4 months. Definitely.
I could totally see that someone ambitious with outrageous sense of humor and a vision would want to do it.
I know a friend who is she is like in the world of animation and is actually working on the new Ren and Stimpy reboot, which is like a very popular cartoon. So yeah, I could see even like a cartoon version of it or something. It would be really, because again, it's like I was saying before, my sense of the book is really this like space for all these different genres to happen. So I could see a film version of this being a very natural very natural part of it. Yeah, that'd be so exciting.
Are you working on another novel?
I am, yes. I do have another novel in the works, and I am so neurotic about my projects and process that it would be hard for me to say very much about it. Because I would describe it to you, and as I described it to you, I would be watching the look on your face so intently, and if it didn't show complete excitement, I would probably abandon the whole book. It's just like it's always in such a fragile. You're kind of like. I feel like my writing ideas are these like shy little bunnies that I have to coax out of the shadows for years, and then I finally feed them some lettuce, and they start to like me and hang around a little bit more. So, but I can say it's set in 1950. That I know and can talk about. So it's a little bit more of it's not set in the future, but it's using historical fiction more as a genre to play off. Much like this, Plastic is sort of using speculative fiction as a jumping off point to do a lot of different things. So this is more like historical fiction. But I will say it's equally weird. It's it's not as if it's going to be normal at all. Maybe it would be great to write something normal. I just don't know if I'm capable of it. Yeah. One thing I just thought I'd mention is, being on tour around the country and I've done about 30 shows with Plastic now. I have been blown away by how independent bookstores are thriving and what an integral and lovely part they play in their communities. So that's something I've really, I have a show tonight at Joseph Beth Bookstore, and I have one at like Prologue Books in Columbus, Ohio tomorrow. And it's just, I think something like 1,000 or 1,200 new independent bookstores have opened up since 2021. There's a lot of people don't know about this, but they're really flourishing at the moment, and it's almost this like expanding movement of local community engagement with bookstores. And so I had no clue about that before I went on tour, but yeah, support your local bookstore. I guess I'd say they're incredible, and they're also spaces of education and learning where people can find out about things like climate change and get plugged in and step out of digital culture and our sort of the isolation that Plastic depicts. I think local bookstores are one answer to that.
How is tour with a book different from touring with music band?
Lot less equipment, lot less loading in drums, lot less fatigue, many less late nights, not getting paid in part by free beer, which is always unhealthy when you're told, oh, you're exhausted, you've been on the road, you're playing. Well, as part of your payment, have as many pitchers of cheap beer as you want. You can't have the good stuff, but the cheap beer is flowing. It's a healthier lifestyle altogether to walk into a space with your book at 4:30 p.m. and say hi and have a lovely chat with a bookseller, and then a nice crowd comes in and you talk. I think a huge difference too is bookstores are self-sustaining with or without your event. So there's just the vibe of it is very different. It's more like you're coming in as just this kind of additional, added bonus to what they're already doing. At the club, you're the main event, and so the pressure is on a little bit more in that sense. And they need you to make the money for the club. So there's some tension with that. But one thing that has been fun and that's a little different with mine is I'm actually touring with music as part of it. So the song I sang from the book, Mora's Song, is not one of the songs on the album. I should have said that outright. And I do not sing on the album either. I have a terrible, 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 terrible singing voice. But I bring in a PA system and I have a singer with me, and we... I'll read up to the point where a song happens in the book, and then I switch on the music and the songs happen. So it has been a music tour, but not with nearly as much equipment, in a very different way. And also the singer for many, many of the dates is my wife, the novelist Rachel Cochran, whose book The Gulf is out in paperback now. And so it's been a real joy to, tour with her and enter into all these bookstores. And a lot of times the bookstores too, like tonight at Joseph Beth, they'll order her book as well, so we both read from our books, and so it's just been a lovely thing for us as a couple as well.
This is a mixed genre book in a big way.
I think coming up as a person who loved books in my teens, it was those mixed genre books like Ulysses and so forth that really captivated my imagination. Where the book was this incredible, capacious space of all different kind of narrative flourishing. And so, so I luckily had the chance with Pantheon Books to really realize that in a bigger way with this, and it's been a lot of fun. I should mention, too, that I made most of the album with the artist Cinder Talk, Johnny Rogers, who's incredible and whose music you should check out. Yeah.
And I have one last question for you, and it's a question that I ask all my guests who teach creative writing.
Oh, yes.
So, what is the most important thing you teach your students if you want them to remember one thing from your class?
I would say try to get lost, right? Try to get lost in your imagination. I think that's the ground for all good work, is you somehow vanish into your work and forget you're even there, and everything you're writing about feels very real and vivid to you. And I think out of that almost like dreamlike state, unbelievable things can happen. And I think you do your most unique personal work too, because it's you. You're not trying to imitate something else or please a specific type of reader or something. I think getting into that unself-conscious place can be really powerful.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you. It's been so much fun, Katerina.
It's been great talking with you.